are Mrs. Rosemary Aslam, and you live with the defendant at Highlands Road, Fulchester.
Yes.
How long have you been married, Mrs. Aslam?
12 years.
Are there any children?
Yes, 4.
Mrs. Aslam, would you care to give your evidence sitting?
No, thank you.
Very well, then please speak up so the jury can hear you.
Yes.
Now, Mrs. Aslam, I see you have a mark on your cheek.
It's a scar.
Yes, can you please tell us how you received that?
A man came to the door.
Yes?
He said he wanted to see my husband. I told him he wasn't in. He said he would wait, but I said no, he couldn't.
Now, let's be quite clear about this. When was this?
One day last summer.
Yes, can you be a little more exact than that?
Well, July the 21st.
Yes, thank you. So the man rang the bell, or did he knock?
He rang the bell.
Yes. And you answered, and he asked for your husband, and you said he wasn't in. What happened then?
He became violent. He started shouting and banging things about. He pushed past me into the house and started knocking things over.
Yes, did you recognize him?
No, I didn't.
Never seen him before?
No.
Now, did he say why he wanted to see your husband?
Something to do with some money he owed him.
Did he say what for?
Something about a boat.
And did you know what he was talking about?
No, I don't know anything about my husband's business affairs.
I see. So this man pushed his way into the house and started knocking things over.
Yeah, well, into the hall this was. He went into the hall. It's really a room with furniture, you know. I tried to stop him. I got hold of him. But he was very strong and he was shouting. He went quite mad. Anyhow, he pushed me against this cabinet thing my husband has. It's got china in it and that sort of thing. And I cut my face on it.
Yes. Exactly how did you do that?
Well, it has sharp edges, you know, on the top.
And they made this nasty scar you have there.
Yes.
Yes. Did it bleed?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, what happened then?
Well, when he saw what he had done...
What I've done? She's lying. It's absolute lies.
Quiet, Mr.
But my
Wheeler.
lord, it's a load of lies, it's that.
Unless you're silent, I'll have you removed. Sit down.
Now, Mrs. Aslam, when he saw what he'd done...
It seemed to quieten him down. He said to tell my husband he'd been and he wanted his money and he'd be back. Then he went.
Yes, and of course when your husband came home you told him all about this.
Yes.
So what did he do?
He went straight to his room and I heard him typing the letter to Mr. Ali.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Aslam. No further questions.
He didn't take you to a doctor, Mrs. Aslam?
No.
Well, it looks as though it must have been a very nasty gash to me. Why didn't you go to a doctor?
It had stopped bleeding by then.
And you never saw a doctor about it at any stage?
No.
Curious. Well, when did it stop bleeding?
Oh, after he left.
Immediately after he left?
Well...
Half an hour after?
Before my husband came back.
Why didn't you go to a doctor yourself, or a hospital for that matter, immediately after the incident?
I was frightened. I didn't want to cause a fuss.
Oh, but you phoned the police, of course.
No.
Why ever not?
I didn't think of it.
A man bursts into your house, a complete stranger, he assaults you, he smashes up all your furniture, and it doesn't occur to you to call the police?
I was waiting for my husband.
Before deciding what action to take?
Yes.
Well, why didn't you phone him?
I didn't know where he was.
But he must have some sort of central office or secretary where he may be contacted.
Don't think so.
You don't think so? You don't know?
He does it all from here. I mean, from home. Please don't shout up.
So you waited an entire hour in your smashed house with a bleeding face, doing nothing but waiting for your husband?
I cleared it up. It was in a terrible mess. I cleared it all up. He would have been angry to have seen all that.
Are you happily married, Mrs. Aslam?
Don't know what you mean.
Well, some marriages are happy and successful, and others are not.
Yes, it is.
It is a happy marriage.
Yes.
Plenty of give and take.
Well, my husband's a businessman. He works very hard indeed. I clean his house for him. Besides...
Yes?
Well, He believes that the husband should not discuss business with his wife.
And you accept this?
I'm his wife.
I notice you took the oath as a Muslim.
Yes.
What religion were you brought up in?
Methodist.
And you changed it on your marriage?
Yes.
Now, in Islam, I believe there is a strong emphasis on the absolute obedience of a wife to her husband.
There is.
Even to the point of lying on oath? Well, let me put it another way. I suggest to you that Mr. Wheeler did come to your house and that he was very angry, but that you were not hurt on that occasion. Now, I suggest that your husband put you up to this whole story and that the injury was sustained on another occasion altogether, but that he suggested, or rather told you to say, that it was caused by Mr. Wheeler.
Don't shout up.
Is it not true?
No.
How on earth could you possibly know who your husband was writing to?
What?
Well, you say that when you told him what had happened, he immediately went into his study and wrote to Mr. Ali.
I heard him typing.
But what made you think this was due to this alleged assault? After all, he hadn't taken much notice of your injuries, had he?
He was writing a letter.
But you said to Ali.
Well, he told me it was to Ali. He told me after. He said it was for the money.
Oh, then he does discuss his business affairs with you?
Well, just this once, yeah. He was so upset.
At your injuries?
Yes. No. At everything.
But you didn't know who Ali was.
I'd heard of him.
In connection with business?
No, in the papers. He was often in the papers. I knew who he was. He told me the money was owed by Ali.
Your husband bullies you, doesn't he, Mrs. Aslam? And he bullied you into lying here today. How does he bully you? Does he shout at you? No further questions, my lord.
No re-examination, my lord.
Thank you, Mrs. Aslam. You may leave the witness box.
My lord, when I cross-examined the witness Wheeler, I was unaware that this alleged assault was the reason to be put forward for the sending of these letters after 2.5 years' delay. With your lordship's permission, I should like to recall Mr. Wheeler.
Mr. Parsons?
No objections, my lord.
Mr. Wheeler, will you please enter the witness box again? I must remind you that you are still on oath.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wheeler, did you visit the accused's house on July the 21st last year?
Yes, I did. I got fed up with not being paid properly and put off with this excuse and that. He never answered my letters. So I just got on a train and came down to Fulchester and turned up at the house just like she said. But I did not assault her, or strike her, hit her, break anything, and none of that nonsense.
You did get angry.
Well, wouldn't you?
Did you get angry, Mr. Wheeler?
Yes, I did get fed up, steamed up a bit. But there was none of that, and what she was saying, I never touched her.
You saw no sign of injury to her face?
I saw none.
And you certainly didn't see any blood?
Absolutely not. I never got past the door. She just stood there saying that I couldn't see him and didn't know where he was, and all that. Now, I admit I shouted at her, and perhaps I banged the door, and then I went off.
You never entered the house?
No, she had one of these chains on, where the door opens a few inches. We just stood staring at each other through the crack.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
You are a violent man, are you not, Mr. Wheeler?
Me? I don't know what you mean.
Well, I mean, you've admitted losing your temper from time to time. You yourself describe it as seeing red.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Or didn't you strike Mr. Ali in the back of the head with a landing hook during a fracas on your boat?
Yes, but I'd have known if I got in the house all right.
You see, I suggest to you that you turned up at the Aslam's house in a fair old temper. And when Mr. Aslam wasn't there and Mrs. Aslam seemed not to be very helpful, you lost it completely.
No.
You did smash the furniture about, and you did, perhaps accidentally, cause Mrs. Aslam to fall against the cabinet as she is described.
If I gashed a woman's face, if I'd have done that what she's got on her face, I'd remember it till bull's noon.
Whatever that means. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. You may go.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it falls to me to instruct you as to the law in this matter. The charge of blackmail on which the defendant stands accused is laid down in the Theft Act of 1968 as follows. A person is guilty of blackmail if, with a view to gain for himself, he makes an unwarranted demand with menaces. And for this purpose, a demand with menaces is unwarranted unless the person making it does so in the belief that A, he has reasonable grounds for making the demand, and B, that the use of the menaces is a proper means of reinforcing that demand. Now, the defense does not deny the demand was made, but says Mr. Aslam believed he had real grounds for making the demand and did not employ menaces within the meaning of the Act. Now, in assessing that defense, you will no doubt take account of the fact that the alleged payment demanded was for an illegal service, namely the means of illicit entry into this country. You might then think that this demand could in no way be called reasonable. You might also think that even if the defendant had real grounds for demanding payment, it is unlikely that he would expose his organization to the scrutiny of the police in seeking their cooperation for the recovery of a bad debt. It is up to you to decide on the basis of the facts alone whether the prosecution has satisfied you beyond reasonable doubt on these 2 points. Now, another point which bears on the question of menaces. When the House of Lords made its July decision, which changed the status of many legal residents of this country to that of illegal immigrants with no right in law to remain here, they added a rider that the Home Secretary should exercise discretion if there were compassionate grounds, such as a family, then a more lenient view might be taken. Thus it follows that the threat of exposure to the police, if it was made, though unpleasant, would by no means start an irresistible process of law culminating in Mr. Ali's expulsion from these shores. You will now retire and consider your verdict.
All stand.
Members of the jury, will your foreman please stand? Just answer this question, yes or no. Have you reached a verdict on which you are all agreed?
Yes.
Do you find the accused, Mr. Mohammed Aslam, guilty or not guilty of blackmail?
Guilty.
Is that the verdict of you all?
It is.
Mr. Aslam, you have been found guilty, and in my opinion rightly so, of the crime of blackmail. In the circumstances, there can be no question of leniency. You are exploiting the miseries and misfortunes of your fellow countrymen in a minority section of the community, men who originally came to you in need. On this charge, you will go to prison for 5 years. Take him down.
Next week, a chance for you to join another jury when our cameras return to watch a leading case in the Crown Court.